Welcome to the State of the Nation. It's time to talk about this economy, and we have got just the person to do it with today, and that is sort of editor, he introduced himself as when I asked him what he does, of Currency, a new financial website which is really doing brilliantly. Go and check it out and we'll talk more about it. But before we start this interview, I want to remind you that this episode is sponsored by Pace Car Rental. Now, you know we've had a long association with Pace Car Rental. There's a discount. If you go and book a car through Pace Car Rental, use their website, use the code SONA and get a discount. So thank you to Pace and thank you for watching. And if you're one of those 76% of people that watch us and don't subscribe, we're going to come and get you. So subscribe to the channel. But joining me today is Rob Rose from Currency. Is it Currency News or Currency?
Currency News, Mike.
Currency News.
Great to be here.
Yeah, Rob, formerly Financial Mail, you were the main guy there writing all the articles, and now you're doing it. It's a great startup. It's really is a good channel to follow.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the media environments are, as you know, it's a tricky one. It's changing a lot, and I think you have to adapt and do new things if you want to. Firstly, just reach people. There's so much, as we spoke about this before. So much information out there and so little intelligence. So you need to get to the guts of what things are.
Yeah, and you guys are doing it and working on that model of a handful of really talented, experienced contributors.
Sure, I'm also there though.
No, don't worry. We're going to give you some things, but you you write some great, insightful stuff. That's why we had to have you on. And before we dive into some of your sort of articles, some of the work you've done, let's talk about this economy, because I know you've been on this beat for a while. Do you think the South African economy? Do you think we've just given up? Have we just given up on growth?
I mean, sub 1% growth for more than a decade is outrageous. We have a sophisticated economy. We have a great stock market. We have some really skilled people, and it seems completely bizarre that we have such poor growth. But in a sense, there's no reason to invest in a country where you have messages from the politicians like Mantashe about the mining industry that completely circumvent and contradict what President ArcelorMittal says in New York. You'll say, come and invest, the country's open for business, and then the policies you pass show the country's not open for business. So you have this duality. So if you are a foreign investor sitting in New York and you think, well, where can I invest? The country where they have crazy policies in place that has just been grey listed, that's not where you'll put your money. So I don't think we've adapted to the fact that you need to fight to a much greater extent for investment, and we're saying the wrong things.
Yeah. Now, obviously, it's not like we've never had growth.
Yeah.
We had wonderful growth 20 years ago. What worries me the most is that we've now got a generation of people. If you are 40 years old and you went after school and studied and then went into the economy, you've never experienced growth, and you stop knowing what that feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I speak to so many people at the banks in various places, and for them, it's just they talk about resilience and hanging on. So we become an economy that's just hanging on and people are surviving, but there's no, that idea of you can make something fantastic and build growth, build wealth, employ people, build these fantastic things. I mean, that seems to be very secondary now. I mean, sure, that's possible, but now it's kind of, can we survive a year? And that's not a great place to be.
Yeah, because to me, a really bad word, a really derogatory, demeaning word is that word, a job. Job. It sounds like like something you have to endure, right? It's not something you want to aspire to. You don't want to say, when I grow up, I want a job.
Exactly.
No, when I grow up, I want to do something. I want to do something fantastic. But we've got a government that talks purely about a job.
Absolutely.
As if it's one thing. You go there to the mine or whatever it is, you with your pick or whatever they say, or your shovel or whatever, and you come back. It's like, it's almost like the Seven Dwarfs kind of thing. Or I go off to work. I'm not going to create anything. I'm going to just get a job.
Exactly.
Let somebody else create it.
And I think that's was the expanded public works program.
Yeah.
You employ people to dig up roads, to hold signs. It's not giving people, people want self-actualization. They want to do something they enjoy. They want to make a success of their life and enjoy going to work. I mean, to do something that gives their life meaning, and just having a job that basically just, you're somewhere to make so government can tick a little box. That isn't helping you at all. And I think that's a serious issue now in the world of AI, where the very low skilled jobs are being taken. We have things that are not going to make us competitive if we don't gear up our economy. And I feel like we're not thinking about those kind of things in a big way. I mean, we have a situation where officially 1 in 3 people don't have a job. Unofficially, it's far closer to half. And with the youth, it's worse than that. So that's not my worry, is that you get to a point where there's a tipping point that you can't come back from easily. And the other thing, Mike, that I think is important about this is so few people are in the economic system at all. So few people are dealing with the banks, dealing with salaries, dealing with tax, that kind of thing, that it delegitimizes capital. It makes anything that's coming from the economy and from capitalism seem bad. So we have the demonization of capital, and that's partly because so few people are in the system and understand how it works. So we have conspiracies about capital. We have conspiracies over who owns the economy, that Johan Rupert calls the shots the whole time, which is just not true. And that's partly because people are not in the system. They don't know how it works.
Yeah.
And it's the less exposed you are to it, the less financial literacy you have to it.
Yeah, and of course, then you yourself have nothing better to do all day but to come out with these crazy things to work out who's out to get you.
Absolutely.
I can confirm very few people are out to get you, just by the way. That's one thing my experience has taught you. If you're worried about who's out to get you, don't worry, you're not that important, I can promise you that.
Because people are thinking about themselves.
Yeah, people think about themselves. It's kind of a crazy thing, but and it doesn't help with the company we're keeping, the economic company we're keeping. Back in the 2000s, we were comparing ourselves with the rest of the world, constantly trying to climb the ladder. Now we've got mates down in the bottom shelf, and we look fantastic compared to Malawi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the thing is that I think that, you have to, South Africa hasn't really learned that you have interests, not really friends. So we stick to having friends that don't help us economically, that are very bad for us.
Yeah. I think the one thing it'll make people understand is the day we get invaded by Rwanda or something, those friends are all going to be...
Is that happening right now? Should we leave the studio?
Those people aren't coming to help us, I can promise you. They're not letting their young men die, your friends that you think are out to help you. That's not going to happen. But Rob, let's get down to some of the nitty-gritty about this economy and what's holding us back. There's a couple of things. You wrote an article about the problem with BE. Let's talk about it. You wrote why it's bad for the economy. It's a drum that I have pounded many, many times. I'm not afraid to say it. You said it in far more eloquent, economical type of words. Explain what the problem is with BE and why 2 white guys should be discussing this at all.
Well, I mean, the thing is, black empowerment, you have the notion in 1997 when they have the National Empowerment Commission of that the economy is still very racially segregated. It's a lot of white people own the majority of wealth. A lot of black people still dominated the 99.9% of poor people. So they have this National Empowerment Commission to say, how should we deal with this? They put in place a whole lot of rules. They put in place black empowerment deals. All the big banks, all the big companies do these black empowerment deals. And we have 20, 30 years of that now, where it's basically 28 years of that. And all that's happened, if you listen to William Gumede, who I quote in this piece, the University of Witwatersrand governance professor.
Been a guest on the show a few times.
Exactly. So he said, essentially, all that black empowerment's done in the way it's been implemented is it's transferred 1 trillion rand of wealth to about 100 politically connected individuals. And what it has done, it's made the currency of the economy all about who you know, and who your mates are, who your cadres are. And that's completely not about an economy that should be based on meritocracy. So it fundamentally undermines the philosophy of the economy. It has done nothing to narrow the wealth gap, if that was the original goal. And it has been implemented in patronizing terms. It's opened up the grounds for massive corruption in the economy, as we've seen. We've seen that with the McKinsey deals. We've seen that with Eskom. We saw it with Trillion. So many of these deals were corrupt because of that, because of the need to interpose a third party who just basically does nothing other than be a third party. You're a black empowerment partner for McKinsey. And all that's done is just created massive corruption. And I think that if we talk about why foreign investors look at this country askance, it's because of things like that.
Yeah. Now, that's one part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that just by changing the board of executives, or even to swap out, one HR manager with another, you're not creating any growth.
No, I don't.
It's just purely a replacement, a swap.
Yeah.
Swap isn't, it means that person that was earning, I don't know, 50,000 Rand a month, somebody else is earning at 50,000 Rand a month. You're not growing the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the original perception back, if you look at 1997, was that, with greater participation of everybody, the economy will grow, and that has completely been forgotten. You have a look at these new employment equity targets that the Labour Minister has tried to put in place now, and that is ridiculous. It says if you're in the financial sector, you need to have, 66% or 63% black women in this particular level, 25% black males in this level. It is the most dictatorial, Stalinist kind of thing to actually dictate you will need this exact percentage in this particular industry, and nothing about that is growth. It is just dictatorial. It's just dictating who should be in what. It's nothing is about. It's about perception. There's nothing fundamental and growth oriented about that.
Yeah, it becomes Orwellian.
That's absolutely Orwellian.
Yeah,
we tend to use the word Orwellian the whole time and it has become a cliche because of the amount of Orwellian actions we've seen in the economy, which is just bizarre.
Yeah, look, personally, I lived through the demise of apartheid, and the demise of apartheid, I think, contrary to what popular belief, was those minor ridiculous laws that, as it went on, became impossible to decipher and adhere to. Yeah. And eventually it falls in on its own inconsistencies, on its own stupidity.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's when people say, look, this isn't what helping anybody. So let's just get rid of it.
I mean, Mike, I've been reading a lot about those employment equity targets that they want. And every single industry has written to the minister, to the government, to say, like, this doesn't accord with where the skills are in this economy. You have a look at where the skills are. You're putting in place these targets. And in some cases, they just raise the targets. They published some in 2024 and then just said, oh, a year later, let's just make them this much. The insurance industry writes and says, this does not accord with the targets, with the skills level in our economy. You just dictate this number. We don't have people to do this. So it doesn't just not further growth. It actually undermines growth and destroys companies.
Yeah. And Rob, there's another aspect to this. And it's something that I truly, truly believe in. And that is the psychology of it all. We mentioned about growth, and we say, I've always thought that possibly the best thing that's kept the American economy at the peak for so many centuries now has been the idea of the American dream. Doesn't have to be real, it's just an idea. The fact that I believe that I could become a billionaire is enough to make me work harder and strive for more. And we just need one example every now and again of some person, and that sends a whole another generation out there trying to improve. What worries me in South Africa is that it is unbelievably demeaning to black people, right? To say to a person, in essence, you're not good enough for this job, but we'll intervene and you can do it, even though we are saying publicly you're not good enough for it.
Yeah, there's a huge degree of patronization in that. I mean, the fact is you are telling, and I think it creates a perception that if people are in certain jobs that they are, you see people talk about how I've been called an empowerment candidate. And that's a hugely demeaning and disparaging thing to have to deal with. And that's one of the consequences, the collateral damage of what this entire system we've created.
Yeah. And we've got to be a little bit careful, because obviously the problem with bad policy is that some of our trading partners will tell us, but very few. The majority, like the Europeans, smile, say nothing, and just generally disinvest. But the US has been very vocal, and it's become a sticking point under the Trump administration. What do you think of our problems with the US?
Well, I think that the US has legitimate gripes on some things. I mean, I obviously don't think there's a genocide in the country. There obviously isn't a white genocide in the country. But equally, their views on what we should have as the black empowerment licensing, for example, when it came to Starlink. Starlink was the obvious one. Is they said to qualify for a telecoms license, you need to be, I think it was 30% black owned. And for these multinationals to say, well, we can't sell shares in our company to a local group. So then it becomes a situation where the country says, well, this is just the rules we have, and the company says, well, then we won't invest in you. So do you lose out more by not having Starlink? And from what I've read of the Starlink documents, where they talk about what they can do to bring broadband to rural areas, the country would be the loser in that. So you stick to your ideology and you lose out on potential growth in your company for a ridiculous ideology.
Well, it's even worse. We had an interview a couple of months back with a spokesman for the ANC, and she said that when I put it to her, that investors, then if they don't like it, just go and invest in India.
Yeah.
You know, which of course might be quite good for India, not very good for us. But obviously it now seems like we're trying to get back on side with the US. We've got Minister Parks Tau, that failed mayor of Johannesburg. I can't help thinking that suddenly he's become the boy wonder, and I remember him being so bad when he ran Johannesburg. I suppose you got a similar thing with Ramokgopa, the electricity minister, was so bad when he ran City of Tshwane. Oh. But anyway, we're not scared to recycle bad people in South Africa and then call them good. But anyway, Parks Tau is there. He's the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, which does make a little bit of a change. I mean, just changing tack a bit, because the Ministry of Trade and Industry was always a place where the ANC saved their cruelest joke for South Africans. We always put people that hated trade and hated industry. Ibrahim Patel, Rob Davies, Alec Irwin. It was like a rogues gallery. It was like if Karl Marx came to life, even he'd be horrified by those ministers. But we do have the Minister of Trade and Industry going to America.
And I feel like you know, South Africa has been shocked by what the US has said on things that they should have seen coming. And the Americans published a whole list of what are the non-trade barriers with South Africa, and South Africa just didn't expect this to happen. So now we have 30% tariff. They're trying desperately to negotiate it. I think a few weeks ago they got the new offer from the US, and they looked at it and they were still appalled by it. But I feel like that, you know, we have politicians and I think government officials who are not very in touch with what's going on, that don't speak to people. And I think people in a lot of these government ministries, as you know, tell them what they want to hear. So when something does happen that is contrary to what they expected, it's a huge shock, and we have months that go past where nothing can be done to fix these things because of the fact that people were ill prepared for what should have seemed obvious. And I think that's our government has been like that. I think the ANC government particularly has become more and more dislocated from the people over the last 30 years, and that's reached the situation where they reached 40% of the vote last time. And if you listen to Frans Cronje, that's inevitable, really. You have fewer people in the economy. People's standard of living is worsened. So inevitably you'll have, this is quite actually a linear and rational thing, is that the ANC loses power.
Yeah.
And it's because it's dislocated itself from the electorate. It doesn't speak to people, and then is surprised when there is pushback to policies that just aren't rational.
Well, you know, it's interesting the way you frame that, because there has been sort of an understanding, or almost part of the policies of the ANC, that South Africa wouldn't do things in a linear and rational way. In other words, even if we don't deliver services, they'll continue to vote for us. Yeah. If you think about that people, supposedly smart people, sit around a table and confer a lot, because, boy, they meet a lot. And they haven't worked out that if you give zero growth, people will start not voting for you.
Absolutely. And the ANC traded on the political capital from negotiating the end of apartheid for a very long time, and that made it massively complacent. And the fact that you have so many more younger people who weren't around then shows you just how little value is now attached to that political capital. It's diminished, and this is what the consequence is. You can't trade on that forever. So this is entirely inevitable. I mean, I think the next year's local government elections are going to be a massive wake-up call for the ANC when they realize that the support in areas that they believe were theirs forever. I mean, Jacob Zuma used the word "till Jesus comes back."
Yeah,
I think that'll be a huge watershed. If Helen Zille wins in Joburg, which is entirely possible, I think that'll be a huge wake-up call for the ANC in the province.
Yeah, and they're waiting for Jesus to come back, and they haven't realized that Trump deported them.
Exactly.
Many of them, they were working.
He's in Mexico again.
Back in Mexico, yeah. But let's get solutions driven here. Because in many ways, once again, whether the ideologues like it or not, things are going to change.
Absolutely.
Because nothing sobers you up like not having money.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And the country has run out of money. How does the tax take the money that is generated and paid through to SARS? How does that continue to even stay steady?
Well, we've had a series of very lucky events the past couple of years. We always seem to find a windfall. We had the contingency reserve 2 years ago, which the money came from gold reserves, and that helped us out at a time when we needed it. In this particular current year, we've got massive receipts from resources. Platinum and gold has increased. But so you have these things that come and bail out a country that is just fundamentally spending too much. And I think if you look at the budget, it's not only is the country spending too much on things it shouldn't, the actual value it's getting on certain things is very poor. The DA pushed very hard for an analysis of how we're spending and how it's going. But if you look at things like the police and education, we do spend quite a bit on those two areas, but we don't get value for it. And that's because we just throw money at stuff. The police, for example, I was speaking to people today about how policemen are having to buy their own boots. I mean, they're having to buy their own boots and bulletproof, and there's money going to the police, but where is the money? We're just not getting value for it. So I think there's massive inefficiencies in government spending, which is a waste of our taxpayer money. So there's that element to it. Then you need to fix the policy. You need to get foreign investors. You need to have things like this equity equivalence that they talked about with Starlink. Get foreign investors and say you don't have to sell your shares in your company. You can do something else. You absolutely have to get practical about that. And I think that'll help people come back to the country, foreign investors, because you get a foreign investor and it does change the dynamics of the economic system. Yeah,
and of course, the one thing that gets lost in this whole thing is that what are foreign investors out to do? Foreign investors you'll only go and invest somewhere else to make money. Otherwise, what's the point, right?
Exactly. You're not there for sentiment.
Yeah, you're not there to help them out. This isn't, some kind of like, family situation. So foreign investors want a return, and by definition, we're giving them no return in having an economy that's not growing.
Absolutely. I was in Kenya last week, and the difference between Kenya, where things are growing, where people are investing, and there's a sense of energy in the air, compared to Joburg is palpable. And I think it's such a pity, because we have a sophisticated financial system that could really do wonders in the continent, but we're just not using it properly. You know this, you've seen this. And you compare 30 years ago, the energy, 20 years ago in Joburg to where it is now, it's another world. Yeah.
And of course, we're starting to see countries on the African continent come past us.
Absolutely.
Those are the big ones, but we're going to start being passed by the middle income African countries. So we've been passed by Egypt, we've been passed by Nigeria.
Ethiopia is setting up Ethiopia Air as a regional hub.
Yes.
Ports in Mozambique. It's a real issue. If we don't use we're wasting what we have. We're wasting what we've been endowed in this country.
Yeah, because we are the most industrialized country, but it doesn't help if you can't drive on the road that gets you to that factory. And you can't run the factory because you've got no electricity.
Absolutely. And I think the extent of de-industrialization with ArcelorMittal, with what's going on in the Eastern Cape, is really alarming. I mean, you want a country that builds on industrialization and doesn't reverse it. And there are there's tariffs, there's all kinds of other reasons for it. But the fact is we have been de-industrializing. And to not have a long steel maker like ArcelorMittal will actually be a serious thing for the country.
Yeah, that means that much like the electricity thing curbs our ability to grow. So not having long steel is going to hurt our physical growth. You can't put up buildings if you don't have that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Rob, where are the low-hanging fruit for our economy? What is the low-hanging fruit?
I think it's the things we know already. I think it's making changes to the investment policies to allow for equity equivalence. I think it's rethinking, scrapping this employment equity targets that the Labour Minister just take that away. I mean, it's not helping anyone. It's just putting in place all these barriers. I think we look at mining and where mining is right now. I think deal with mining policy. The fact that we have a mining policy that now wants 26% black empowerment of even exploration projects. Now, as the mining industry says in their response to Gwede Mantashe on this, when you have an exploration company, you're looking for minerals, you don't have a company. You put every spare cent into looking for minerals. I think you need to rethink how you do it. The government at the moment is thinking extractively to find more money, and you can understand that, considering we're a cash-strapped country. But the point is it's diminishing growth in the longer term. So the politicians are looking to shore up their current position in the short term, not thinking of the long term. So we have a feed now think of later approach at the moment. I think that needs to stop. So those, I think, are just a couple of the very obvious ones on policy that we could do right now.
Yeah, because of course, when you go back to the mining exploration example, you're asking that private company to take 100% of the risk.
Yeah, for sure.
And have 74% of the upside. Plus, you've got to pay VAT. Plus, you've got to pay salaries, you've got to pay PAYE. The government ends up getting a lot more than you could ever get. You might just say, why do it at all? It would have to be the most splendiferous strike ever to make money out of it, and then you're going to create other problems when you grow. So the policy is a real issue.
And Mike, I think the other thing is local municipalities and local governments. I think Joburg it's still the richest city on the continent. People come to the city and infrastructure doesn't work, roads don't work. It's not great. I think, perception is a big thing. I think you can't have a situation where we have such a disastrous economy where if you employ somebody, you can't assure the people in your company of various things that they should be able to be confident of. And I think that that's a big thing. So municipalities have been ignored to some extent by the national government. And I think fixing those things, and this is the metro, the smaller rural areas are disasters.
Yeah, so we've killed off rural economy. I had to smile when Nkabisi Jonas said in his speech they need to build another city in Eastern Cape, and no city's actually been built since 1994. And I wonder, this poor chap was Deputy Minister of Finance. Did it not dawn on him then? Instead, his legacy is going to be doing business with Iran and getting banned from going to the US. It astounds me how you get people like that in these very important positions, and they act like they weren't there when it happened. But he was one of the most important voices at the time.
He was a very important voice. And the point is that I think at the time he was one of the more ethical voices in the Zuma administration, which was a bizarre. That whole Zuma era was just. We're still bizarre. Counting the costs of that. Sure. Ramaphosa has done nothing for the last 8 years since he's been in charge. He hasn't fixed the economy like people expected, and that's why the GNU dividend has failed to awaken the economy like people expected. But I think that the Zuma era was ruinous in so many ways.
Yeah, although you call Jonas ethical, here was a guy who took 6 months before he said, actually, you know what, I was bribed 6 months ago. And everyone says, what ethics? That's fantastic. The guy finally had told us all, but it took him 6 months to get there. And he only sort of said it in a by the way. So here we are in South Africa, and sometimes what you need to be is at your lowest ebb. That's when action starts happening. And it feels like things are starting to move, for good or for bad, I suppose, because the state has run out of money. We do have an issue of these crazy laws being questioned and being hard to defend. We do have a trade and industry minister realizing, oh hell, we don't replace our biggest reciprocal trading partner that easily. Yes, we can sell our oranges, can go to China, but China turns out doesn't want our badly made cars. They'll rather have their own cars.
Yeah, they have ours.
Yeah, so, and China views us as a market for their products, not as another investment opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is the role of China as you see it in the global economy, especially with regards to South Africa? Do you see them being able to fill a gap?
I don't think China wants to fill that much of a gap. Just like we've learned with some of those trade deals, like you specifically mentioned, initially people said, well, we can just do more deals with China. And then you realize that China doesn't want a lot of our citrus. China doesn't want a lot of our wine. They can buy it elsewhere. And China is it does think in the longer term about African resources and building up position in a country. But I think that we overestimate our importance to China. In many ways, we're a BRICS partner, but we are by far the smallest of them. So I think that we overestimate our importance. There are Chinese companies operating here, and they have done certain deals and they want a position here. But it's not like China's going to be our big savior. And China comes with lots of strings attached. There are ideological strings attached, which are not always fabulous. And the ANC government doesn't want to necessarily do what China wants the whole time. So I think that, you're making a deal with the devil. You're thinking you'll replace you'll replace the dollar. I mean, the notion of just replacing the dollar is something that people talk about, but it's not as easy as that. That's not going to happen like that. I mean, the dollar is still going to be the currency of the global economy for the next 20, 30 years at least, I imagine.
Why can't it be replaced?
It's ubiquitous in global markets. I think it's the most trusted currency still. The issues now with the valuation of the dollar and it diminishing because of inflation in the US, but it's still the nature of global commerce is all done through the US because it does tend to have the most open economic system. China doesn't have an economic system. It has quite a closed system, and a lot of currencies otherwise control their currency movements quite tightly. This is why the dollar, I think, you won't just replace with a BRICS currency. A BRICS currency is a fiction at the moment.
Yes. And as Vladimir Putin's finding out to do a straightforward one-for-one trade, not too many people understand what they're going to do with billions of dollars worth of rubles.
Yes, well, exactly.
Or rupees, for that matter.
And you see, I mean, Russia is, the volatility in BRICS, I think, is amplified by where Russia finds itself. It was, people thought when Trump took over, Trump's friend and Russia would find a way back in. Now we're finding it's not so simple. I mean, Trump has now, in the last couple of weeks, been talking about the Ukraine and how he's drawn a line in the sand with Russia. And I think that it's, to make any kind of big bet on a BRICS currency and what BRICS partnership does for you in a long-term economic sense is very fragile at the moment.
Yeah, look, I would say that there's a chance of changing the reserve currency when I see the next South African president stuff a different currency in his couch that isn't dollar. That's when you know that there's a chance there's a different...
Exactly.
There's a change to the global reserve currency. But even our president undermined this idea of a global... He wouldn't stuff rands in his couch. I suppose his couch wasn't big enough. And he certainly wasn't stuffing yuan in his couch. So
and there are things happening in the world digitally, I think, that are making it more likely that you're more likely to have a Bitcoin that'll be a reserve currency than a dollar in 20 years' time. It's hard not to say that, but at the moment there's no other currency that can compete. The euro isn't there, and I think the yuan is not there at all yet.
Now, Rob, just in general, looking at the bigger picture, the global economy seems to be going through a really bad patch. I don't know what gets it out of this particular time we're in, but it would seem that the answer probably starts once again in the US, leading with growth. You've got terrible problems with debt everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a look at America, I mean, part of the reason for the real reason for its tariff ruptures in the last couple of months is because of the US debt being so huge. And I think Trump wanted to do something about the size of the US debt and alter the global dynamics. I mean, the way he's done it is in a way that's likely to, as you know, will import a lot of inflation there and cause the dollar to weaken. But it's very fragile. I think that's, Trump has only been in office 9 months, and this is what we've seen. So I don't know where it'll be in the next year. I think we're in a world where there's far more debt, there's far more inflation globally. And I think trade routes are being reassigned. And the question is to what extent it'll be calmer in a year's time. And I'm not sure it will be. I mean, we have news now on a daily basis that is, would have taken a year to come out 20 years ago. It's everything's sped up at the moment, and it's hard to predict where the economy will be. Yeah. But it is fragile.
Rob, you mentioned this ballooning debt that's now everybody is faced with and doing something about it. Just explain to everybody, because I think it needs explanation, as to who is the money owed to?
Well, I mean, it's largely banks. I mean, banks largely own the money. I mean, you write it up in America, you owe the money, it has to be repaid with interest, and it's on a balance sheet. This is not actual real dollars. This is money on a computer somewhere. The amount of actual real physical cash out there is nothing compared to what's on computer screens. But Goldman Sachs will be saying, this is what I'm owed by this particular country, and it'll be there. So effectively, you have to pay it back. And part of the global system relies on countries not defaulting on their debt, on the bonds that they own, their sovereign debt. I mean, when that happens, it's a huge thing, and companies and banks won't lend to you again. Argentina did it, a couple of countries have done it, and then you struggle to get any money to finance what you need. And a lot of countries, most countries, you all need debt. You all need debt to do certain things you do, and then you get tax money in, you repay it. So a system where you have countries defaulting on debt is massively destructive for that particular country. You saw Argentina take many years to recover, and the other countries that have made similar, Zambia also defaulted on certain things, and it becomes, that's when investors won't come to your country.
Yeah.
If they think you're somebody who doesn't follow through on your promises, you will struggle to get investment. And it's a huge boon to a country like South Africa when, say, a foreign entity will come and set up shop here. If Goldman Sachs were to, or Wells Fargo sets up an office here, it'll be a big thing. But you're not going to do that if you're not going to follow through on your promises.
Yeah, and of course, we've got to remember that a lot of that debt actually is owed to the pension fund holders in those very own countries.
Yeah, exactly.
So everybody says America owes so much money. They owe it to Americans.
The PRC in this country, they basically invest for government pensioners. They have a huge amount of government bonds, and also owning bonds for Transnet, for Eskom. So much of it depends upon those entities being functional and repaying it so that your pensioners can have their retirement savings.
Yeah. Now, look, ultimately, within the global system, there's opportunities for a country like South Africa. There is no doubt. We just need a small sliver of the global market, and it would make a massive difference to South Africa.
And, you say that, and I think the issue is that people feel very intensely in South Africa. They feel immense frustration when you see silly policies, because you sense all this potential. You sense what could be done. You've seen it actually happen. That period from 1999 to 2008, probably, before the global financial crisis, was great growth for South Africa.
You've
seen the potential.
President Jacob Zuma. So,
Yes. Even our banks survived the global financial crisis better than global banks. This is a country of huge potential. So it's so frustrating when you see things that are, kicking yourself in the head after you've almost won the race. It's like, you've done so well to get to this point, and then you just decide, I don't want to finish the race. I'm going to go and have a Coke on the side and see who else finishes the race first. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, or you do a Herschel Gibbs where you start celebrating the catch before you've got the ball in your hands.
Oh, I thought you meant agreeing to throw the match and then forgetting about it.
That part too. But look, I think that there are solutions. South Africa, we know what the problems are. I suppose we're one of the few countries that's actually very aware of it, and the government's falling because it won't deal with it. I'd imagine it's going to be very hard for us not to do something about this economy.
You look at South African companies. I think the Time list of the top 100 companies last week came out, and there were a couple of great South African companies on that list. Standard Bank was our highest, Sanlam was there. There were so many great companies, and these are companies that have done well despite crazy government policy. And I feel like there's just so much potential that we could live up to and be so much better than we are now, and that's the frustration.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There are solutions. It can be done. It'll all start with you subscribing to the State of the Nation. I bet you didn't realize that. But Rob Rose, thank you for enlightening us. We're going to have you back talking about this economy.
Great.
Some more. Thank you so much for joining us. To everybody that watched it, subscribe, support Pace Car Rental, and come back for our next interview on the State of the Nation. Thank you for joining us today.